The morning sun climbs over the eastern hills of Rome, casting long shadows across the massive stone amphitheater that dominates the valley between the Palatine and Esquiline hills. Already, tens of thousands of Romans are flooding through the 80 entrance arches of the Colosseum, their voices rising in anticipation. They've come for blood. They've come for spectacle. They've come to watch men tear each other apart, to see exotic beasts ripped to shreds, to witness criminals devoured alive by starving lions. In the underground chambers beneath the arena floor, gladiators check their weapons one final time. Wild animals pace in wooden cages, their roars echoing through the stone corridors. Condemned prisoners whisper final prayers, knowing that within hours there'll be nothing more than mangled corpses dragged across blood-soaked sand. This is Rome at its most brutal, its most magnificent, its most terrifying. Welcome to the arena. The gladiatorial games didn't begin as the massive public spectacles they would become. Their origins trace back to the funerary customs of the Etruscans and early Romans, who believed that blood sacrifice honored the dead and appeased the gods of the underworld. The first recorded gladiatorial combat in Rome occurred in 264 BC, when 3 pairs of fighters battled to the death at the funeral of Decimus Junius Brutus Pera, a distinguished aristocrat. His sons Marcus and Decimus arranged the event at the Forum Boarium as a tribute, a blood offering to ensure their father's safe passage to the afterlife. But what started as solemn religious ritual quickly transformed into something far more elaborate and sinister. By the end of the Republic, ambitious politicians had discovered that staging spectacular games was an effective way to win public favor and advance their careers. In 216 BC, the sons of Marcus Aemilius Lepidus honored their father with 3 days of games featuring 22 pairs of gladiators fighting in the Roman Forum. The crowds were mesmerized. The spectacle had begun its evolution from sacred duty to public entertainment, and there was no turning back. By the time the Colosseum opened its doors in 80 AD, gladiatorial combat had become a highly organized, brutally efficient business that would define Roman culture for centuries to come. Standing nearly 160 feet tall and measuring over 600 feet in length, the Flavian Amphitheater, known today as the Colosseum, remains one of history's most impressive architectural achievements. Emperor Vespasian ordered its construction in 72 AD on the site of Nero's artificial lake, reclaiming land from the despised tyrant and giving it back to the people in the form of a massive entertainment complex. His son Titus completed the project in 80 AD, celebrating with 100 days of inaugural games that saw approximately 9,000 animals killed over the entire celebration. The structure could accommodate between 50,000 and 80,000 spectators, depending on how tightly packed the seating arrangements were, carefully segregated by social class. The emperor and senators sat closest to the action in the marble-clad podium level. Behind them, the wealthy equestrian class occupied the next tier. Further back, common citizens filled the upper levels, while women and slaves were relegated to the highest, cheapest seats under the blazing sun or seasonal rains. A massive retractable awning could be deployed to provide shade, operated by sailors from the Roman fleet who were experts in handling such rigging. But the real genius of the Colosseum lay beneath the arena floor. The hypogeum, a vast network of tunnels, cells, and machinery, was added during Emperor Domitian's reign. This underground complex housed gladiators, wild animals, and condemned prisoners in separate chambers. An elaborate system of ramps, pulleys, elevators, and trapdoors allowed for dramatic entrances. Lions could suddenly appear as if rising from the earth itself. Scenery could be quickly shifted. The arena floor could transform from a forest clearing to a desert landscape within minutes. Up to 60 elevators operated simultaneously, lifting cages of beasts or raising platforms of fighters into the arena above. The engineering was as sophisticated as the violence was primitive. Gladiators came from the margins of Roman society. Most were slaves, purchased specifically for combat training. Others were prisoners of war, captured in Rome's endless military campaigns and forced to fight for the entertainment of their conquerors. Criminals sentenced to death might have their execution commuted to the arena, trading a quick end for the slim chance of survival through combat. Astonishingly, some were volunteers, free men who signed contracts binding them to the gladiatorial oath, seeking fame, prize money, or simply a way out of desperate poverty. These fighters were classified into more than 24 distinct types, each with specialized weapons, armor, and fighting styles. The Murmillo wore a heavy helmet decorated with a fish-shaped crest and carried a large rectangular shield and gladius sword. The Retiarius fought nearly naked, armed only with a weighted net, trident, and dagger designed to ensnare heavily armored opponents. The Thraex wielded a curved scimitar and small square shield, employing agile attacks against slower foes. The Secutor pursued the Retiarius with curved sword and oblong shield, his smooth helmet designed to prevent net entanglement. Each matchup was carefully choreographed for maximum drama and excitement. Training occurred in specialized schools called ludi, and the largest and most prestigious was the Ludus Magnus, located directly east of the Colosseum and connected to it by an underground tunnel. Built by Emperor Domitian, this fortress-like facility housed at least 80 gladiators in small cells, where they lived shackled like prisoners. The complex included a practice arena, heated floors for winter training, baths, medical facilities, and accommodation for approximately 3,000 spectators who paid to watch the gladiators train. Archaeological discoveries at similar schools in Carnuntum, Austria, and Pompeii reveal that gladiators lived under constant supervision behind locked gates, essentially high-value prisoners whose worth was measured entirely by their ability to fight and survive. Training was relentless and brutal. Novices practiced against wooden posts called pali, using weighted weapons that made actual combat gear feel light by comparison. They progressed through ranks, from raw recruit to tiro for their first fight, then to veterani if they survived. The most skilled might achieve the coveted rank of primus palis, the first stake, becoming instructors themselves. Despite their slave status, successful gladiators could achieve remarkable wealth and fame. Their names appeared on artwork and inscriptions throughout the empire. Women swooned over them. Some were considered the celebrity sex symbols of antiquity, with ancient graffiti proclaiming their romantic conquests and virility. If gladiatorial combat represented Rome's mastery over its human enemies, the Venationes, or beast hunts, symbolized its dominion over nature itself. These spectacular displays featured exotic animals from every corner of the empire, and their sheer scale is almost incomprehensible. During Titus's inaugural games for the Colosseum, approximately 9,000 animals were slaughtered over 100 days. Emperor Trajan's victory games in 107 AD featured 11,000 animals. At the Millennium celebration of Rome's founding in 248 AD, the displays included 32 elephants, 10 elk, 10 tigers, 60 lions, 30 leopards, 10 hyenas, 6 hippopotamuses, 10 giraffes, and 1 rhinoceros. The logistics of procuring these creatures were staggering. Specialized hunter troops tracked and captured animals across Africa, Asia, and Europe. Lions came from North Africa and Syria. Tigers traveled from India. Crocodiles and hippos were shipped from Egypt. Bears arrived from Gaul and Britannia. Leopards were trapped in Africa. The animals were transported by ship and wagon in specially constructed cages, requiring regular feeding and care to keep them alive. Carthage became a major hub for this exotic beast trade, with amphitheaters and training facilities dedicated to preparing animals for the arena. Professional hunters called Venationes faced these creatures armed with spears, bows, swords, and whips. Some specialized in particular animals, developing specific techniques for killing lions, bears, or elephants. The most skilled Venationes achieved celebrity status, earning fame and fortune through their dangerous performances. The morning hunts typically preceded the afternoon gladiatorial contests, providing hours of bloody entertainment as men battled elephants, rhinoceroses, and big cats in elaborately staged scenarios. Sometimes animals were pitted against each other in forced combat between species that would never naturally meet. A lion versus a tiger, an elephant against a rhinoceros. The environmental impact was devastating. Historians and naturalists believe Rome's insatiable appetite for arena spectacles contributed to the extinction or near extinction of numerous species across the empire. North African elephants disappeared entirely. Bears vanished from the regions around Scotland and northern Europe. Lions became rare across their former territories. The games literally consumed entire animal populations, transforming ecosystems through the relentless pursuit of entertainment. Between the morning animal hunts and afternoon gladiatorial contests came the midday executions, the gruesome intermission known as damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. This was not combat. This was slaughter, designed to be as brutal and humiliating as possible. Condemned criminals, deserters, runaway slaves, and Christians were thrown to starving animals with little or no means of defense. Some were tied to stakes, unable to move as lions or bears tore them apart. Others were released into the arena and hunted down, their desperate attempts to flee providing dark amusement for the crowd. The Romans adopted this practice from the Carthaginians in the 2nd century BC. Initially reserved for military traitors and deserters, it quickly expanded to include various criminals deemed worthy of especially degrading death. The punishment served multiple purposes. It was meant to deter crime through intimidation, to demonstrate Roman justice and power, and to provide spectacular entertainment during what might otherwise be a lull in the day's programming. Some executions were choreographed as mythological reenactments, with condemned prisoners forced to play doomed characters from Greek and Roman legends before being killed in character. The scale of these executions over the centuries was substantial, though exact numbers are difficult to establish from surviving records. The midday spectacles were generally considered the least popular part of the day's entertainment, not because audiences found them too cruel, but because they were often boring and predictable. Even the philosopher Seneca, no bleeding heart, complained about the tedium of watching defenseless men torn apart, noting the lack of skill or drama in such one-sided slaughter. Early Christians were among those condemned to the beasts, though modern scholars suggest their prominence in arena martyrdoms was somewhat exaggerated by later Christian writers. The practice was intended to equate Christians with the worst criminals and to publicly humiliate them by stripping them of the protection Roman civilization offered its citizens. Historical accounts describe victims wrapped in animal skins and thrown to wild dogs, or women stripped naked and attacked by specially maddened beasts. The crowd celebrated these deaths as affirmations of Roman power and divine favor, a reminder that those who rejected Roman authority and gods would be cast back into the savage wilderness. Perhaps the most extravagant and logistically impossible spectacles were the Naumachia, mock naval battles staged in flooded arenas or specially constructed basins. The first recorded Naumachia occurred in 46 BC when Julius Caesar celebrated his triumphs by excavating an artificial lake near the Tiber River, approximately 1,800 feet long and 1,200 feet wide. Up to 4,000 combatants, all prisoners of war, fought in ships representing Egyptian and Tyrian fleets while crowds watched from marble seating surrounding the temporary lake. Augustus topped his predecessor with an even grander Naumachia in 2 BC, creating a basin measuring roughly 1,200 by 1,800 feet that held 30 ships with rams plus numerous smaller vessels. 3,000 fighters, not counting rowers, reenacted a battle between Greeks and Persians. In 52 AD, Emperor Claudius staged a Naumachia on Lake Fucino, involving 19,000 fighters and 100 ships representing Rhodes and Sicily. According to the historian Tacitus, the condemned prisoners initially refused to fight, forcing Claudius to send his imperial guard to instigate the bloodshed. The Colosseum itself was reportedly flooded for Naumachia during its opening games in 80 AD, and again around 86 AD under Emperor Domitian. This has been the subject of intense archaeological debate. During the Colosseum's first year of operation, before Domitian added the elaborate hypogeum underneath, the arena floor was flat and could theoretically be flooded. Modern hydraulic engineers have calculated that using the Aqua Claudia aqueduct, the arena could be filled with approximately 5 meters depth of water in 30 to 70 minutes, creating a shallow but adequate basin for specially designed flat-bottomed ships. The spectacles were brutal even by Roman standards. The combatants were typically condemned criminals and prisoners of war who fought to the death in reenactments of famous historical sea battles. These weren't training exercises or theatrical performances. They were mass executions choreographed as entertainment, with casualty rates approaching 100%. The last recorded Naumachia occurred in 248 AD at Rome's Millennium celebration, after which the practice faded from history, remembered as one of the most extravagant and expensive displays of imperial power ever conceived. The gladiatorial games were not just entertainment. They were a massive economic enterprise that generated enormous wealth for those who controlled it. Lanistae, the managers of gladiator schools, could earn annual profits equivalent to hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in modern terms. Successful gladiators were valuable commodities, expensive to acquire and train. A skilled fighter might be worth tens of thousands of sesterces, making their owners wealthy men. This economic reality meant that, contrary to popular belief, not all gladiatorial combat ended in death. Killing gladiators in every fight would be financially ruinous. Instead, matches were often carefully managed, with referees enforcing rules of engagement and combat, sometimes ending with both fighters surviving. The defeated gladiator could appeal for mercy, and the crowd, or the editor, the sponsor of the games, would decide their fate. A brave fighter who had performed well might be spared to fight another day. Only the most lackluster performances or the most bloodthirsty crowds demanded death. In the early years of the Colosseum, death rates were higher, but as the cost of replacing gladiators increased, survival rates improved. Politically, the games were tools of power. Emperors and ambitious politicians spent fortunes staging elaborate spectacles to win public favor and demonstrate their generosity and strength. The games reinforced social hierarchies, with seating arrangements reflecting the rigid class structure of Roman society. They provided a release valve for social tensions, channeling the aggression of the urban poor into spectacle rather than rebellion. They demonstrated Rome's military might and the futility of resisting the empire. Every defeated barbarian forced to fight, every exotic beast from a conquered province, every public execution served as a reminder that Rome was the center of civilization, and those who challenged it would be destroyed for a public amusement. The roar of the Colosseum has long since faded, but the shadow it cast across history remains immense. For nearly 4 centuries, Rome's arenas ran red with blood, consuming hundreds of thousands of lives in pursuit of spectacle. These weren't just shows, they were displays of absolute power, expressions of cultural values that celebrated martial prowess, glorified conquest, and reduced human life to entertainment. The gladiators, the beasts, the condemned, They all served the same purpose: to remind Romans of their superiority and to fill the endless hours with violence so spectacular that it would numb the soul to all lesser horrors. In the end, Christianity's rise contributed to the game's decline, though it took centuries. The last recorded gladiatorial combat occurred in the early 5th century AD, and by 523 AD, the games were formally abolished. But the fascination never died. 2,000 years later, we remain captivated by the brutal spectacle of the Roman arena, drawn to the same savage entertainment that enthralled ancient crowds. We may claim we're different, more civilized, more humane, but when we gather to watch violence unfold, whether on screen or in stadium, we carry forward something of that ancient bloodlust that once filled 80,000 Romans with ecstatic roars beneath the Mediterranean sun. If this glimpse into Rome's darkest entertainment has left you wanting more, hit that like button and subscribe to the Codex of History. We'll continue exploring the shadows of the past, uncovering the brutal truths that shaped our world. Because history isn't always noble or inspiring. Sometimes it's just blood on sand, echoing across the centuries.